Welcome to Between Product and Partnerships, a podcast focused on bringing together product, partnership, and engineering leaders to discuss how to build, support, and scale SaaS ecosystems. This podcast is presented by Pandium, an integration platform for building native integrations.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening to our podcast, Between Product and Partnerships. If you're listening for the first time, we talk about the challenges and what it takes to build integrations, partnerships, and SaaS platforms. We talk to leaders working on these problems to learn about trends and how they're navigating this space. Today, we're so excited to have Shrijit Patel, a technical product manager at Chronograph, which is a fintech platform that helps PE firms track, analyze, and manage their investments. Thank you so much for joining us. So before we dive in, I think the group would love to learn a little bit more about your background, how you got to this space, and then we can dive into your expert advice.
Of course, and thanks for having me, Cristina and the team. Hello everyone. My name is Shrijit. I'm trained as an engineer. My background is in electronics engineering. I second major in computer science after college. Joined Accenture. I was doing anti-money laundering. At that time, it wasn't into like financial services or anything. Something I found pretty cool to do economic sanction data and anti-money laundering. It was good. You get to see some of the terrorist-related data and you get to make decisions about it. It was a pretty cool gig. So I loved it. Then I wanted to be more specific on a product level. So it's like I can do data analysis and build system out of it, but I want to go more product roles. So I joined FIS in their hedge fund division. So build product for hedge funds, accounting product, expanded my role to doing hedge fund and private equity, did for about 5 years that. At that point in time, I was like, I know how to build product. And I was like, I want to expand to more the why and what, like going the other side of the table. I went to University of Michigan to get my business degree. And while I was there, I started my own company that was also in financial services, ran that company for about 2 years, joined Amazon. I was doing pricing for their global store, and then my current role where I lead basically data API integration team for Chronograph.
That's awesome. I didn't know about the Accenture thing. How long were you there? That sounds like a super interesting job.
It was just a 1 year. It was very small gig, but the amount of exposure, the data you get to see it. It was pretty awesome. Like when I see it for the first time, it was blow my mind. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Was that your first gig out of college?
Yes.
That is like a wild first job. I think you win. Everyone else is like, an associate somewhere, and you're out there looking at data from terrorist organizations. I totally did not know that. I'll have to add that to my list of folks that I know. And even on the Amazon side, I have a background in e-commerce, and like pricing can be a beast. Everyone thinks it's easy, but it could be really complicated. So definitely a great background there. So let's dive in to background. So from your perspective, for product managers who are looking to better understand integration development and data infrastructure, what are some often overlooked technical concepts or skills that you think could be beneficial and really give them an edge?
So I think considering like my technical background aside, like when everyone starts about the data integration and data pipeline, there are core components that everyone tackles and be like data consistency and transactional integrity, schema evolution, backward compatibility, data governance and lineage, and that will cover majority of the features you want to develop into it, right? But I think some of the overlooked part, which I have been also at the beginning culprit of, is when we talked about it, and if you're pure backend PM, you should think about it like if you're a front-end PM, you looked at the user journey. But as a backend PM, we don't look through the life cycle of a data flowing through the infrastructure. So I think that's one of the, and in my current role, I have to look through both front end and back end. But like as a back end technical PM, I think that's one of the key skills that you can develop, like visualizing the life cycle of data flowing through the whole infrastructure, right? And there are a lot of different frameworks you can implement as a part of your job. One thing, and there's framework like theory of constraints you can put into it. There's also about the resilience engineering. I don't know if you heard about that, but resilience engineering, I don't like the resilience part. There's also, do you know about the Nassim Taleb? He's an economist and is a modern day philosopher, if you think about it. And he wrote a book about anti-fragile. which is this, the resilient system is like, if you're thinking about the data and you be like, oh, if there is a data volume spike, I needed to have the resources to handle those things, right? So you're making that system resilient, right? It should not get break and whatnot. In the integration world, there are a lot of stuff it's outside of your control. It's the external dependency, a lot of the versioning you don't control, how much changes the external system makes you don't control, right? So you should be thinking not like resilient part, but the anti-fragile, meaning fail gracefully kind of a thing. So prevent all failure. That's how we all like wired to design our system. But we should be also be thinking about it, how to handle failure gracefully. And that could be like any kind of thing. You put circuit breaker, you talk about relay logics, you bet fallback data strategy. And I think if you focus on just the core component, you can release a feature. But if you focus on about this anti-fragile engineering part of it, that will give you a credibility for a scalable system. And I think it's, if you start thinking in that direction, it gives you a good edge when you design long-term scalable integrations.
Man, I could talk forever about, we call them like resiliency and the ability to, as you said, to like fail gracefully. We spend a lot of time thinking about that because even with like the most perfect systems, you're going to end up with failure patterns. And I 100% agree with integrations. There's a lot of external dependencies and there's just a lot of data dependencies that you can't predict, right? Which is also why load testing integrations can be really challenging. Like you can load test your own API and you can load test kind of with synthetic data for integrations, but it can be really hard to really simulate like user behavior when it comes to external systems. So love that. It's also, I'll make my little plug for why I say never rely on webhooks for all of your integrations, just because this is like data flying over the internet. And like, again, perfect world, everything is great, but more often it's, that webhook fires. And if you miss it, there's like no ability to go back. There's no ability to reconcile if you're only doing that. So I could talk to you, I'm sure, forever about integration design, but totally agree. When you're talking about like the data kind of architecture side, where would you point people to look for, like theories around that or any resources that you would call out to think about? Because I'll say the question is coming from working with a lot of companies that are not older, but older in SaaS terms, right? They're like 10 years old. And you've had, N number of people working on the data modeling internally, and the API can be like really fragmented. So what would you recommend if someone is either starting from scratch or even walking into that kind of environment in terms of ways that they can frame that thinking? And maybe you sound like a man that reads books. Maybe there's some books you'd recommend.
Yeah. I think there's a book by O'Reilly. I forgot the author, but Designing Data Intensive Systems. You're definitely not an engineer. It's a very engineering heavy book. I have read through a couple of chapters. I think I read through those books in a way that, I'm kind of like identifying patterns and what chapters is like along those lines. And you try to get through those things. But I think as an engineer, you can speak the same level, but I don't think so. As a technical PM, you expected to like know all of those things. I think it's what's the key as a technical PM is reasoning through system level challenges. If you can, whiteboard an API flow with your engineers, that's something expectable. If you just talk normal database languages, it doesn't have to, you're pretty good at writing store procedure or whatever, but fundamentals about like how this works. So I think fundamental concept helps you in those direction. As long as you can talk those system level concepts, you'll be pretty good. So specifically like design data heavy systems, that book was pretty awesome.
Yeah, and that actually leads into our next point is what kind of technical fluency do you think is often overlooked for these kinds of roles? Like you just said, the ability to sort of understand how data flows between systems or around systems, and you're not expected to necessarily be an engineer, but the more you can speak their language, the more credibility you'll also have within the organization. So are there other things that you'd recommend folks to brush up on if they didn't go potentially to school for engineering?
I think if you are in a data field, like some of the CAP theorem, you should like consistency, availability, and partition and fault tolerance. You should definitely like brush up on like what that even means. Like messaging and queuing, that like just like a high level understanding what that even mean. Caching, consistent caching, global caching. those were the key ones. You can be like, if you simply be like system level thinking and be like, you create a visual diagram, like your engineer going to come up with a high level system design and you're just talking through it. You need to ask those probing question of like why someone did this and what's the reason behind it, and having those understanding some of those fundamental concepts would go a long way. Yeah.
It's so interesting because like the things that you're mentioning, like message buses and caching and things like that, like these are concepts that have existed for so long. APIs, I think, launched technically in 2008, but there were like web services before that. And these ideas have been there forever. We kind of keep reinventing the wheel when it comes to APIs, but there's just some best practices that are wildly consistent. I'm happy if I can see all CRUD functions for every endpoint. And I've talked to folks like, what's CRUD? I'm like, yeah, it's like really like low kind of basic stuff, but folks forget, when you're trying to solve a specific problem, sometimes it's easy to overlook the larger use case.
And it's going to be evolving, right? So if you think about the REST, people thought about it like it's a protocol, right? It's a standard, like universally be adopted for application program interface and communication. But those protocols gonna evolve, right? It'd be some whatever the standard they come up with, they're gonna have some cons or some limitation, and then be like, we gotta have some new communication protocol, and be like, yeah, GraphQL will come along, gRPC will come along. It's again people trying to implement standards. When they design these standards, they'd be like, oh, like we try to encompass at the abstract level, like pretty much all. But as we start using it, you will quickly realize there's no silver bullet. Specific for specific use case, they come across those limitations and then like, what next we can develop? And you cannot be just steadfast on like, this is the silver bullet I'm going to go with. It's just, what's your use case? What's your end customers want it to be? Where you are right now, where you want to go 5-6 years later, and you just try to make a best guess out of it. It was like, what can we develop? And then you adopt after 5 years or 2 years.
Yeah, and I think not making it like needlessly complicated too. I think we did a talk here, it's on our YouTube channel, my co-founder, about OAuth 2 and how it's not really a protocol because it's actually, there's been like 36 revisions of it, and it reminds me of this. It's like, oh, everyone's gonna do OAuth 2, and everyone says they're OAuth 2 compliant, but everyone has their like own little flavor of it. And I think you can get away with that because that's sort of a one-time thing. But when you look at like your API design, the data modeling and things like that, like, you don't want to get too cute. Like, like don't be too precious about your design. Like there are well-worn patterns, and to your point, they're going to need to evolve. So like the more generic they are, the easier it's going to be for you and everyone around you to like manage that over time.
Is it in the same concept? How do you think about the new protocol which been going around recently, the MCP one? It's more broader to it. It's more specific to the AI and LLMs. So basically, like think about it, it's model context protocol. Like they're trying to do like creating a unified layer, right? So let's say Pandium. What you try to do is like you have different tools, and you're trying to like, I wanted to connect to Salesforce, QuickBook, and all those, and you'd be like, oh, we're going to create this middle layer, like embedded platform. And that could be like, they could already have pre-built library for those, or you can use any custom. And once you have it, your system can talk to it without much individual mapping to it, right? And they'll be like, if I'm talking to AI chatbot and be like, I wanted to have some tool which is, let's say, Stripe API. And I want it to be like, just rather than having a system which is pre-configured to do something, I can tell it, like, create an invoice for last 9 months for this product that needs to connect to this API. But like, how can LLM model can connect to that API? And I think Anthropic recently came with a protocol with MCP, and now people are building up a lot of those kind of libraries, right? It's like, which allows you to connect with different tools, while the AI will gonna interact with it, not a machine or a user.
So, I think this idea that the world is going to create a normalized framework and like one standard way to do a thing is a great idea. Like in the 20 plus years that I've been doing this, I've heard a billion different versions of that. Yeah. I think, if they're going to do it with AI and say like, hey, if you want your application to be an easy source for these models or whatever it is, you can enforce that because there's a value there. But like, will that become what everyone, kind of
Exactly.
models all their data after. I doubt it. I mean, we're still working on systems that were deployed in the 80s. And some of those silos, I was just having a conversation with a group of other CEOs about this. Some of those silos have the most valuable data, and those are the big enterprise companies. Like, look at a Bloomberg terminal, right? Like, obviously that's a closed loop, but they're able to do really interesting things with data because they control all of that data. They know how it's formatted. It's very like hygienic, so to speak. But all of these other systems, Fortune 50 companies are not run on a cloud-based standard kind of data model. They are using on-prem old school stuff. And I don't know, this is like meandering from your question, but I think we're a ways away from the level of adoption of those things to make it really like a silver bullet. I think if you're using like
Exactly.
small applications, like new ones especially, it's like, yeah, build to that because you're already building. But there's just this huge universe of data that's a requirement for heavy adoption in the enterprise space that is not going to conform to that for a long time. What do you think?
No, I think that's exactly the point I'm trying to prove. It's like whatever the protocol or standards it's been adopted, that's evolves, right? It's not a universal, right? And that goes for your API design as well. Like whatever you have adopted to it, that's specific to the use case that you have in mind, and you gotta be adapt as the new use cases emerges, and you also gotta adapt your schema and everything. There's no gonna be like a standard that you're going to be like, I'm just going to stick with it. And I have seen that a lot of the time, just to conform to those standards, we do a lot of customization, and it just build up a lot of tech debts.
Yeah.
So you got to be mindful about that it got to evolve and adapt.
Yeah, and it's funny, right? It's like, oh, there's a standard, but then when you really talk to folks that do this in practice, it's like there's a standard, but we've evolved it a little bit. And I'm like, well, it's not a standard anymore. It starts as a standard and then deviates slightly. But I think the ability again to like follow best practices enables you to be more nimble. Right? Like if you're not trying to like rebuild the world in your API or in your auth protocol or whatever, like you'll be able to do these things without having to do crazy unnatural acts. When you see people, we have a joke about like some systems are so secure nobody can get in because the auth is like so annoying and esoteric. And when you start doing things like that with your API design, like nobody can understand how this works. That's when you lose the ability to have that kind of extension with more models. But I think it's going to be, with the AI stuff, especially really interesting as the adoption increases from like early adopters and sort of like these toy kind of hobby applications into like really large enterprises that do have these data hygiene problems. It's going to be really interesting to watch how they handle that, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I enjoy observing and seeing where it goes.
Yeah.
It's always fascinating.
Yeah, I'm all for it, man. Like we're all data all day, every day. So like the more it can move around, I think the more valuable it is. It's just some of those silos are they're really black boxes and walled off. I mean, it's not, you can't just deploy an LLM to go like grab the data. That's not a realistic expectation. But let's move to some other questions. So let's talk about building the first kind of like integration strategy and the first integration team at a company. So what are some of the first steps and considerations that you would advise folks on to establish a data and integration pod or team for the first time from scratch?
Yeah, I think one of the key part you got. So in my experience at the Chronograph is like when I joined, they didn't have integration pod, and the idea was me joining as their technical PM, and they didn't give like an integration PM role. It was just like anything backend core infrastructure related, you're going to be handling it, right? And I think it was a lot of struggle. You don't get to have any roadmap. There's no the old roadmap that you inherit. There's some pros to it. It's a completely new slate. You can write it whatever you want it to be. But then there's also a con side. There's nothing, right? You join, what are you going to do? So I think one of the first thing what helped me a lot and over the iteration worked out is finding the where I fit in a value chain, right? So if you think about the business, what business we are in, who are the customers we are providing these tools from, what are the within that value chain where this integration fits in, right? There's also a method you can do it. There's called Wardley mapping. It's basically like a visualization of like your value chain and how does it fit in your evolution index, right? It's like genesis to like new, what stage product, is it commodity, and how does it look like, right? I'm a very visual person, and so I like to be like map out what different parts of business we do, where we fit in. That gives me a pretty strong idea to recommend what we should be building, like where are the ROIs left into it for whatever the integrations we want to build into it, or any other data infrastructure related stuff, right? There's different problem depending on the stage of the company you are joining. So when I joined, it was Series A, super smart people, but like everything is in very few people's head, right? It was like they're very intelligent CEO, CTO, and they've been running it for the last 6 years. It's a lot in their head, right? They have industry experience, they have built, they've gone through like a lot of ups and downs. But then if you be starting to out a new product managers within the team, you need to, like their brain dump to be like getting these things out from their brain to be like map it out, right? What we need to be doing it. So that goes through like a lot of iteration, communications with them, asking right question around this thing, because their time is limited too, right? You want it to be like very efficient with whatever the time you get with them. This I came from Amazon, and whatever the thing I might not liked about the Amazon culture, one thing I definitely liked about it is the writing culture, and be like starting those out, like whatever I do, like everyone should have access to it, and it's an open, like there is no closed gated documentation, right? Whatever I see, whatever I hear, whatever I discover, it's available to everyone. And I start adopting to other teams, like my role, which is very sits into the cross-functional bridge, right? It's like we have two different products. There are different product for AI side of things, and my team basically supports all three, right? So like, how can we cross-team collaboration with moving out these silos? And the documentations and writing culture helps. It's painful for people who are writing it, but it should be like very easy who are consuming those information. So I think those were the key stuff as you starting it out, is like figure out where you fitting in a value chain, what stage you are in those value chains. The second is like getting the discovery, go through the process of like getting the brain dump from the key stakeholders. And the third is establish the clear communication channel, either it's through documentation or whatever you find it much helpful for you. And I think that gives us like a good runway to understand what suggestions you're going to make. But I also want to be cautious in recommending that you should not be just like, when you join a new team, to be like a big idea, big vision, big roadmap. You need to still get the trust from other people's, like your solution engineers, your customer success team, your sales team, other stakeholders. And you can only do that by capturing value. So you need to start figuring out to be like, what are the quick wins that you can deliver within a small team? Get the trust that, you can deliver, you can execute stuff that delivers value. And that over the time, that trust going to build. And now you can ask more deeper question to open them up. So I think that way you need to strike a balance to be like defining a longer roadmap, getting the strategy right, while doing a quicker execution to get the value out.
I 1,000% agree. I think the quick wins are so important. If you're starting a new, like at a new company or a new role within a company, everybody wants their job to be easier and their job for themselves to look good. So figuring out like what those motivators are for each department, or even down to the individual, I think can be really valuable. And then, just providing these little incremental things that, I'm listening to you, like we're going to try to make this better, or I know you're losing business, and that can curry so much favor in an organization and make your life so much easier when you really need help with something. I love that you called out CX, because I feel like oftentimes customer support is overlooked. It's sort of like, they just like help the customers. And I'm like, no, they're the boots on the ground for what your customers are actually doing. Like, you can send surveys all day long to your customer base asking them what they're doing, but these are the folks that really know day to day what your customers are doing with the product. And they're the eyes and ears of the business, and the face of the business after the sale is done. So I think there's a whole like untapped like source of ideas and goodwill that can come from those CX folks.
100%. And the CS is more invaluable for B2B companies, right? So if you're in a B2C companies, yes, they're solving like getting customer support requests. And most of the time people like doesn't look those. But I think even the last two companies I had Amazon has a big thing. It was like you can join those customer support calls. So like you're calling, your package doesn't deliver it, and you be like shadowing a customer support representative to see like how they navigate those things, right? And it's very encouraged. So B2C people be like, yeah, surveys and all those market research can help you, but they also have other frustration. Like if you put like the frustration index, like if you just simply like gather those data and try to map it to like the frustration index, that gives you a raw insight to be like where it's missing. But in B2B, the customer success team plays like very different role and super important, right? They be like, their insights are such valuable in B2B, depending on what kind of B2B you are. Some of the time you do have direct access to your customers. You can talk to them. The customer success representative have an existing relationship that you might not have it. You need to build it over the time, but you can tap into it. But there are some other industries where it's very secretive and no one exposes you to be like talk directly to customers. And that point in time, your customer support or customer success team's personnel, that's your voice of customer, and you cannot avoid them at all.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I love hearing you say that. And the CX folks on my team will know that I'm always like really, it's my background is customer facing stuff. So like, I love it. And I think it's really valuable. And I'll also make the plug for not just having the PMs work with CX, but I think also having even the engineering team, if they're able to shadow, if they're able to listen to calls, depending on your industry, if they're able to like go out into the world and do a customer visit or go to the trade show or like whatever it is, I found in my own career that engineering teams love seeing the things that they're doing in action. And a lot of folks that get into engineering want to solve problems, right? And so the closer they can be within reason to like seeing those problems firsthand or seeing that usage, the more empathy it builds internally. And I think the better output that you get. Because at the end of the day, we're building technology, but we're building technology to solve problems. And that's how we all make money and how we all win. And I think having everyone in an org aligned around those problems by witnessing it in some instances can be really helpful. You know, obviously like Amazon can't have their engineers on every call, but when you're small, especially, or small enough, I think it can be really useful. And we are actually at time. This has been such a cool chat. Any closing thoughts you want to leave with the audience?
No, I think I love to connect. If you are into this space, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be any helpful. And if you are an engineer listening to it, we are hiring. We have 2 roles open in our team. You can shoot me a LinkedIn message or whatever. I'm quite active there and love to collaborate with people.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. If folks want to read more or listen more or watch more about products and partnerships, you can check out the Pandium blog and our YouTube channel where this is going to be playing. And thank you again, Shrijit. We really appreciate you taking the time with us today, and we will see you out there.
Yep. Thank you. And thanks for having me again. It's a good time.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed our content, subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. For more content on tech partnerships, integrations, and APIs, check out our articles, ebooks, and other resources in the description.